Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for putting up with me for the next 40 minutes. It's Friday afternoon, the weather's nice outside, so I know this is a tough gig. Okay, and what I'm going to talk to you is just about our journey at the LEGO Group. It's not necessarily a specific journey or a specific direction, but it's just something we are up to and we're doing. And what I'd love to get from you at the end is just some questions, queries, reflections, because I think that helps us as a company formulate our plans and our journey. For those of you who don't know the LEGO Group, we're the world's largest tire manufacturer. They're just really small tires, but we are still the world's biggest tire manufacturer. No, we make toys. We make construction toys in a specific category called the construction toy category. We're actually, I think, depending on how you calculate it, we're the world's biggest toy company, but that's quite a broad spectrum of activities, toys, games, computer games, etc. A little bit about us. So we are Danish family-owned, formed in 1932, originally making wooden toys, and we had at least 2 factory fires in our history making wooden toys. So I think at some point they decided that wooden toys were proving to be a bit of a headache, so we shifted to making plastic toys in about the late 50s, early 60s, and all of our patents, as they were at the time, stem from 1958. So anything you buy in LEGO from 1958 onwards is compatible with anything you buy today. Now, I think that's a really unique capability of any product, that you can still buy something off the shelf that your father and potentially even your grandfather played with as a kid. Some of our figures, they seem to have been overlapped somehow, but we make our operating margin 34-35%, our sales 35 billion crowns, and more than, I think what's interesting here is more than 60% of our sales are novelties, are new every year. So toys for children is like fashion. 60% of our entire inventory changes every year. We've grown a lot. I think that is pretty much what it says there, and we're now about 18,000 people. And at the time of the crisis, we had a fairly well-known crisis in the early 2000s. We were down to around 6,000 people. So you can see from 6 to 18,000, 11 years of fairly solid double-digit growth. So we feel very thankful for that. This is what we make, essentially, a wide range of products. Lego City is probably our most famous line on the top right-hand side there. These are things that, as kids, you will recognize every day, day in, day out. Probably our best-selling product, bar none, is the Lego Police Station. It seems to sell like crazy in every single country, in every single geography in the world. So it says something about crime or police, or I don't know what it says, but that tends to be our sort of atypical set. Our core market really is boys and girls aged 5 to 10, 5 to 11, something like that. We make a range of products. We make, as I said, Lego City. Lego Chima is one of our sort of fantasy lines. Lego Friends, which is in some way aimed towards more girls, but of course we would like to point out it is a unisex product across the line. And what we're trying to do with Friends, and I think something we haven't explained very well in the past, is appeal to a sector of girls who wouldn't get involved in construction play normally. So not to take girls away from playing with Lego, standard Lego, but actually to bring more girls into construction and creative play. Lego Technic there is for older kids, around gear, wheels, and what have you. Lego Juniors is a segment line that mixes between standard Lego and Duplo, which is Duplo there on the bottom left is our line for preschool, and Duplo in Latin means double, and it's just double the size of every single dimension of the brick. We're located globally. Our home in Billund, in rural Jutland, and that's where I live. Well, I live in Weiler, so I moved from London, so that's been quite an education. So, yeah, we enjoy the peace and quiet. And we have factories globally, so our main factory is still in Denmark, in Billund there, which produces about a third of our output, a factory in Mexico, one in Hungary, one in the Czech Republic, and we're just finishing a factory we built in China. And what makes our company a little bit different is that the toy market is incredibly seasonal driven. Most toys, about 90% of toys, are sold in the 4 weeks before Christmas. So that, as you can imagine, creates some sort of manufacturing peak at some point in the year. But what we do as a company is we make our bricks 24/7, 365 on a fairly static profile, and then we put them into a storage facility, what we call our cathedral. And that enables us to be flexible when we're coming up to Christmas, because then we can assemble different sets according to what the demand profile says, rather than a conventional manufacturing process where you design a toy in January, you send it off to be manufactured in the Far East. That takes a couple of months, then you put it on a ship, that takes a couple of months, then it turns up in the east coast of the US in October, and then between October and January, if children decide they didn't want what you designed in January, then you really have a bit of an issue, whereas what we try and do is then assemble the toys from the kit of parts that we make year-round. So, onto the environment. That's the company spiel. Onto the environment, what our ambition and what my team does is to try and make a positive impact on the world. And the way we feel we do that is through our products. So that is providing really exciting and creative play experiences for children. We know that kids who have healthy, creative, collaborative childhoods turn out to be really good, healthy, creative members of society. We know kids who have poor childhoods turn out often not to be great members of society, and I think we feel we have a great role to play in that. Well, that's what we feel is our biggest impact in the world. Having said that, making all of those toys, and when I started in the company, I think we said we had about 65 bricks per person on the planet existed. Now, due to our growth, I think about 92 bricks per person on the planet exist. So you can imagine creating those toys, creating that big positive benefit to society comes at a negative impact on the planet. We use about 76,000 tons of plastic a year, about 50,000 tons of cardboard. That has to come from somewhere. And my job in the company and my team, what we do is try and mitigate that impact. Can we make it less negative? Can we even make it zero? One day, could we make it positive? So we can stand there truly and say we have a net positive impact on the environment. Why do we do it? Well, I think it's part of who we are as a company. As I said, it's formed in 1932. The little guy there is Kjell Kirk Christiansen, so I think he's about 65 now. And his son, Thomas, is about my age, and he's starting to step into the reins of the company. But back in 1932, it wasn't called CSR, it wasn't called environmental responsibility, it was just called being a decent company. And it was about looking after your employees and looking after the town where you were based and the local environment. And I think that's just translated through the generations, and of course it has a more modern context in CSR, but it's something that we've always been involved with as a company. It's also good for business, and it supports our corporate reputation, so the kind of company we are and we want to be. I think what makes us different as a company is these 4 promises you see up here: play, partner, planet, and people. And play is about the type of products that we make. Do kids find them exciting? Partner is, do we treat our supply chain well and with respect? People, do we treat our people? Do we treat our employees with respect, and do we treat them well? And planet, do we treat the planet well? And what's unique about us is our senior management, they get a bonus every year, and 20% of that bonus is around the products we make, 20% around the planet, 20% around how we treat our partners, and 20% around people. So they're scored on that. The final 20% is what we call economic value add. So that's the money we make as a company. So only 20% of our senior management's bonus is made up by money, which is quite unique in most companies, because most companies, 100% of your bonus is about how much money you make. So that gives me a great, and that's really the start of the story for me, that I already have 20% of the attention of all of our senior management in the company, which helps an immense amount when we want to try and minimize our impact. Why is it important? I think this is probably fairly standard for all of you guys. You probably know this, but I just want to put some of a context for us. Why is it important? Our stakeholders expect that, stakeholder expectations, so customers and consumers, and we call customers our retail partners, so Toys R Us or your local mom and pop toy store, those are our customers, and our consumers, of course, are the end users. And we divide those consumers into shoppers and users, who are often 2 different people. Sometimes they're the same person. If you're a kid with a lot of pocket money or an adult with a lot of pocket money, you might be the same person, the shopper and the user. But people expect it. They expect it of companies, and they certainly expect it of companies, we believe, like Lego. Our reputation depends on it. So when we deal with our suppliers, the work of our supply chain and our suppliers, and anything they do in their supply chain is important to us, and we believe we are a company with strong values, as I mentioned. And we really believe that our reputation as a company, particularly with fast-moving media in the world today, that anything we do as a company can go across the world in seconds. It used to be that it would take a long time. A company would do something in their supply chain. It would take a couple of weeks to get in the local media, then a couple of weeks to get in the national media, and then a couple more weeks to get in the global media. Now it takes, I don't know, a couple of seconds, a minute to go global. We also do it because of legislation sometimes. Legislation in the world is patchy and it's random, but of course it helps. It helps drive companies, both the laggards, but it also helps inspire us sometimes. And we also do it because of cost. It saves us money. When we save materials, when we reduce our waste, it saves us money. And those are just some of the reasons why we do it. I think at the core of it, and that's why that Lego brick is at the core, we truly do it, I believe, because we think it's the right thing to do, and it's what our customers expect of us. So then the first question is, why is environmental impact important? Fine, we've dealt with that. The second question is, well, where do you have your impact? And so for us, about 10% of our impact is in our own operations. So we own and operate all of our own factories, which is, again, quite unusual for the consumer goods sector. Most people design a product and then give it to a sub-supplier or a factory to make it. Well, we own our own factories. And so about 10% of our environmental footprint, 10% of our CO2 emissions, there or thereabouts, is in our own operations. So it's about 100,000 tons of CO2. Our total tonnage then, of course, across the entire value chain, so bringing the brick from its raw materials into being, is about 1 million tons every year. So 10%, and of course that's where we have the most impact. That's where we can really do stuff, because we pay the bills and we control it. 75% sits in our supply chain, so the purchase of raw materials, a plastic granulate. We buy sort of rice-sized bits of plastic, thousands of, as I say, 76,000 tons of them a year in multiple colors, and often we color them at a later stage as well. But the manufacture of that plastic, the turning of the oil into the plastic, the turning of the trees into the paper and board, that's where about 75% of our impact lies. And then around 15% is in our downstream. Of that 10%-ish is in our retail chain, and then 5% is in the sort of use, and we call it disposal, but one thing I might get on it to at the end is really that we would rather not think, definitely not of disposal, not even of recycling. We would rather talk a lot more about reuse of the product, which is where we sort of sometimes come into an interesting discussion on the circular economy, which often the default mindset is to go into recycling rather than reuse. In that supply chain, the 75% of environmental impact, about 50% of that about 45% of that is plastic, 15% is cardboard, and about 5% is capital equipment, so molding machines, buildings, etc. So plastic is our biggest impact, but it's not to say that packaging materials and cardboard, that they're not insignificant. The vast majority of our plastic we use is a material called ABS plastic, which is fairly common globally and used in most things. This computer, car dashboards, all kinds of things. It's probably one of the most common plastics in use. There's our footprint, and we'll share the slides afterwards so you can read it in more detail. It says pretty much the same thing. I think we were trying to make it a bit more accessible to read, but it's maybe a bit more confusing. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's 90-10 is what you're talking about. And I think what I want to stress is that 10% is what we have the most control over, no doubt about that. But we're deadly serious about how we tackle that 90%. That's really, really important to us, and how we want to work with our suppliers. We break our environmental initiatives down into two key parts. We say there's something around climate change, a broad macro issue to do with the world, and something about resources and stuff, that we're using some stuff. We set some targets around that. We say that we want to drive our energy efficiency. So over the last 4 years, we've improved our 3 years, we've improved our energy efficiency by 14%. So yes, we use more energy as we grow, but we're actually getting much better at the way we use energy per brick. So the brick itself uses 14% less energy than it did 3 years ago. We also look at putting renewable energy on our own sites, and we're starting to roll that out much more aggressively over the next coming business period. And we've also secured off-site renewable energy. On our design and packaging, and I'll touch on some examples going forward, we've certified all of our packaging as 100% FSC, which has been a big step for us. We've managed to roll out a minimum of 75% recycled content of our packaging, which sounds relatively straightforward in today's manufacturing environment, but you've got to remember that, yes, we manufacture in Denmark, where 75% recycled content is fairly straightforward to achieve, but we also manufacture in Mexico, and also we manufacture in China, and we also manufacture in Hungary and Czech Republic, and each one of those has a different local supply of paper and board, and a different way of certifying that. So we also have to be really aware of our global presence. Waste, we want to drive down the amount of waste we generate each year, so improve that efficiency per ton of material, per ton of input by 5%. And last year we recycled 92% of all of our waste that we generated in our own production facilities. Oh, sorry, I skipped on there. So our long-term goal is to be 100% renewable energy by 2020. To lower our emissions in our supply chain, and we're really working on what that means and how we should target that at the moment, because the last thing we want to do is go out and proclaim something that is then not feasible or is too easy. And we want to have sustainable materials and packaging by 2020 and 2030, respectively. And I'll touch on that a little bit going forward. Longer term, we want zero waste in our own production. That last 8% of our recycling is proving to be really difficult. As you can imagine, in your own domestic environment, you can recycle your paper, your wood, your plastic, your metal, your glass. But then you get to electronics and oil and hydraulic fluid and whatever, and they all become a bit harder to recycle. But that's what we're working hard on. And longer term, we would really like zero waste in the production life cycle, and that's something we're working on really, really hard at the moment. And again, I can touch on some of the challenges on that going forward. These are just some of the results that we've had over the last couple of years. Our renewable energy investment, I talked about our energy efficiency increase. We've partnered with WWF, who we call our critical friend. So we ask them to keep us honest and challenge us on some of the commitments and the targets that we make, and also to provide us technical advice on things like our sustainability feedstock challenges. On resources, we've reduced the size of our packaging, so we put everything in from one box size and we put it in a smaller box size. Did that a couple of years ago. And that sounds like a very simple thing to do, but it's actually immensely complex, because you have to make changes within the packaging environment. You have to go and talk to your retailers. They need to change their entire shelf layout to the layout that they had last year. You have to talk to your consumers. They're getting a smaller box. Do they feel good about that? Generally, they feel good if they've made the purchase, because they open it up and there's less air in the box. If they are offering the gift as a present, they generally feel less good about that, because people like to give a big box that's wrapped up and it looks nice and big. So lots and lots of discussions when you start to do things like that. But it has a cost implication. We reduce the amount of packaging material we need to buy. But it also takes 4,000 lorries off the road every year, which also has a social impact as well. I talked about FSC and our waste recycling. I think probably the thing that resonates most maybe in this room is our commitment to sustainable materials. So back in 2012, we went out and we said we wanted to be out of oil by 2030. And I think that was a really bold proclamation, I guess, and it's taken us a while to really figure out what that might actually mean. And I think back in 2015, we really revised that and said, no, we want to be in more sustainable materials by 2030. And we said, we're actually going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to put £1 billion behind this. And we're going to do that between now and 2030. So that's £1 billion spread out in research and development funds, spread out between now and 2030. And as I say, I'll come to that. So I think I probably have to speed up a bit as well. We've spent £6 billion on renewable energy, so about $800 million, nearly $1 billion on renewable energy. We have a wind farm off the coast of Germany. We have a wind farm we're just building off the coast of the UK. And so that pretty much takes us to 100% renewable energy. So that's kind of a tick, we feel. And this was a model we gave out to all of our employees to celebrate our first wind farm construction in Germany. We're engaging with our supply chain on a program we call Engage to Reduce. So looking at how do we do some fairly standard stuff like reusing pallets throughout our supply chain. What we've done is we've actually put a foaming agent into the plastic of some of our transport boxes to make them more lightweight, so therefore saving energy and shipping them around and also reducing our health and safety implications as well. We've done a lot of work on optimizing our logistics and transport flow as well. And those are just a picture of some of the boxes and some of the transport flow. So we hope to deliver at least 2 innovation projects, if not more, with our suppliers. So really getting together with our suppliers to say, rather than just telling you to reduce your environmental impact, go do, and here's what we want to see. We really want to have a different conversation with our suppliers and see if we can bring them on board on the journey, which will create a more resilient, a more cost-effective, a more environmentally sustainable supply chain. I think some of the things we've seen in the past where you just tell your suppliers to do something is often not very sustainable, either from a financial point of view or from an environmental point of view. So into sustainable materials, as I mentioned, we sort of relaunched or reinvigorated our commitment in 2015. And so we really needed to go right back to first principles and say, well, what do we mean by a sustainable material? And I think it took all of us by surprise when there wasn't a definition we could just get off the shelf of a sustainable material. So we had to go away and define what it actually means for the Lego group. And we had to then put our ambition into some sort of context. So what we said is that we want to use sustainable materials in all of our core products. So at the moment, we keep that to all of our core box products. So a traditional Lego product, as you can imagine, a box with the Lego kit inside. We have also what we call extended line products. So those are all the things with the Lego logo on, like the water bottles, like the fancy dress costumes, like the plastic swords that you'll buy in Legoland or whatever. That is sort of phase 2 of the project, and that's a sort of different component where we need to work with our suppliers, because we don't make all those things, we have someone make them for us. But what we felt is at this point in the journey, we could deal with our core products, the things that we control. And I think there was a sort of thought in the actual company itself was that this is just about the brick. If we make the brick more sustainable, then we're home free. And I think the more stakeholder involvement we did in the company, the more we tried to understand and then persuade people that it isn't just about the brick. As I mentioned right back at the beginning, the packaging has a huge impact as well. And that's also an area where we can sometimes be a bit more flexible, where our tolerances aren't so fine. In the molding of a brick, we're talking about tolerances of about 2 microns. So less than the thickness of a human hair of tolerance to get the brick to stick together and then break apart. And that brick needs to have shininess. It needs to have coherent color across a big wall of blue bricks. They all need to look exactly the same color blue. They need to sound a certain way. When you mix them in a bowl, there's a particular sound that the bricks make. They need to be safe and high quality. That's probably the 2 main drivers that we're working with. So all of these things compound together, which means finding sustainable materials for bricks is really, really difficult. And I think we're often challenged by 2030. It seems a long way away, but it's a long way away, or a relatively long way away, because it's a very, very difficult task. So our ambition was to have sustainable materials in all our core products, elements, packaging, and building instructions. So the whole thing that you take home as a consumer, we want to make sustainable. And then the second part of that is we want to be known by children, families, and key stakeholders, as it says there, as a company that cares and takes action on sustainability matters. Well, why is that important? Why is it important that people know or care? And we recognize that there's a lot of challenges coming down the road around sustainable materials. Where does the feedstock come from? What is the impact in the value chain of the feedstock? Do we want to use first-generation food-grade material? So potentially taking food material out of the food supply chain. Of that food material, potentially it has GMO. It's made with genetically modified organisms. Are we interested in using that or not? So all of these questions we need to have answers for and have an approach and opinion on. And therefore we need to engage with people. We need to engage with children. We need to engage with parents. We need to engage with academic institutions. We need to engage with people like WWF, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it's not just a technical mission. And we break it into these two bricks here. The blue one we call our technical mission. We just have to, not just, but we have to find those materials and we have to put them into our production processes effectively and in a way that keeps our quality and safety standards. Then the green brick is really what we call our sustainability and engagement challenge. So if you imagine three circles, one of them is, do consumers and customers want it? Or at least, do you think they might want it if they knew what they wanted, if that makes sense? Is it technically possible? And is it more sustainable? And it's those three things that we're trying to do. You can do something that's sustainable, but if consumers don't want it or they don't want it in the future, then there was no point in doing it. It could be technically possible, but not sustainable. So you can see our dilemma there. And so really we need to engage with our customers, consumers, and wider stakeholders in this dialogue, and we need to make sure that the technical mission, this blue brick, is as sustainable as it possibly can be. And that's where we're using tools like life cycle assessment. It's also in some of the discussions that we've had with DTU some years ago as well. And how do we measure this? How do we understand it? And how do we make sure that what the polymer scientists and the material scientists are doing is as sustainable as it can be? Underneath all that, we call it our Catalyst for Change is the Sustainable Materials Center. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. That is really a physical representation of what we're trying to do. We need to build a center, and we're going to fill it with the technical material scientists, the sustainability people, and the more engagement people. So the left brain and the right brain, we're trying to bring together, the art and the science, if you like. And that's what we think is the sort of real killer combination of this challenge, if we can get those two groups together, the sustainability professionals, the consumer insights and the engagement people, and the technical polymer scientists together, those three wheels. Is it technically possible? Do consumers and customers want it, or will they want it in the future? And is it sustainable? We need to bring those three things together. I said a while ago we had to work out what a sustainable material was. So we went away and we talked to WWF and we talked to lots of other people. And we said, okay, a sustainable material is one that meets our high quality and safety standards, of course, and then it has key environmental and social sustainability attributes. Yeah, okay, what does that mean? So we said it has to be compatible with the Lego strategy, number one. I mean, it needs to fit with what we do now. It's not a third way of making a toy. It needs to fit in our Lego system in play. When I talked about everything since 1958 needs to fit together, well, we probably haven't succeeded our objective if then we come up with a new material that doesn't then fit together with everything else. It needs to be completed by 2030. And it can't compromise safety, consumer perceived quality, and durability. And the durability was one we talked a lot about, and say, well, is durability important? You know, sustainable things are generally not that durable. In nature, nature tells us that there is a cycle to creation, use, and breaking down of materials. But we feel, for Lego, the most sustainable thing is that it lasts a long time, that you pass it down from generation to generation. And we're wrestling a bit with that trade-off of, should we make more biodegradable bricks, or should we make bricks that last a long time? Consumer perceived quality I skipped over, but that's really the tricky one for us. What do consumers think about changes to materials? And it depends who you ask. If you ask an adult fan of our product, they care about color, they care about shape, and they care about how awesome the element is. They don't really care about safety. They're not going to put it in their mouth. They're not going to break it. They're going to build cool models with it. Of course, if you talk to the parent of a toddler, or if you talk to the parent of a child, then safety is number one. They don't, you know, what it looks like is somehow secondary. Is it safe and is it high quality? Of course, if you talk to a child who plays with Lego, they're not really aware of the safety implication. It needs to look cool and awesome and do some awesome things. So consumer perceived quality, that's something we're really trying to work on. And also, where does messaging sit in that? So if you look at a brick, and we had a blue brick and a slightly less blue brick, if you ask consumers which one do you prefer, they're probably going to prefer the one that they know and love, the original color. If you tell them that this one is more sustainable and the reasons and the backstory behind it, that might change their perception. They might be prepared to take a trade-off on color if they were aware of how this brick came into being and why it's more sustainable. We break it down then into three things. We say we want no non-desirable chemicals. So, of course, in our product, we have the safest products out there in the market, the same as any of our competitors. I think if you buy a toy from a big or a reputable toy maker, you're going to be pretty home safe to know that the toy industry is probably one of the most highest regulated consumer sectors out there, probably in line with pharmaceuticals, I would think. But when we go into new materials, we also need to make sure that there are no non-desirable chemicals, either in the product or in the value chain. It has to be sustainably sourced and manufactured, and I think that's a departure or a certainly new way of thinking for us, that we need to now look all the way through the value chain. It's no point having a sustainable brick in your hand if it used a lot of fertilizer to bring the feedstock into creation. And so that means we want to look at things, sustainably sourced renewable materials, so in general, plant-based materials, recycled materials, so absolutely looking at post-consumer waste and recycled materials that are out there in the market. The challenge with those is how do we maintain the quality standard of the product that we're trying to deliver. Or carbon capture technologies, which I guess some of you will be familiar with, is just finding carbon from an unconventional source, whether it's algae or out of the air, rather than getting carbon from oil, as is the most common process. Then we say the processing, of course, has to be sustainable. You know, again, no point having a sustainable brick if you used a ton of energy, water, or inputs to bring that brick into existence. And then minimum waste in the value chain, so both in the manufacture and also at the end of its life. And sorry, I think there's a bit of a formatting issue, but you can kind of read it. So the elements and the materials should be recyclable. So that's what we said. It should be durable, but also recyclable. And then we took a slightly different approach on packaging, saying, actually, the packaging could be compostable. We don't maybe want the brick to be compostable, but the packaging could be compostable or recyclable. So again, these are all choices. No, we're not saying one is right or not, but we're saying they're choices that you can make. Some examples of what we've done so far in leading up to this. On the right-hand side is our old ballista packaging, so a plastic pack sandwiched between two layers of cardboard. Of course, a bit harder to recycle and a bit harder to open, but of course what consumers get is that they can see the product there on the bottom left of that. So we've moved away from that packaging into a cardboard packaging there on the left-hand side, single material, single stream material, totally recyclable. Actually stands up, so it avoids the need to hang it on something, which is a bit more sustainable. And also it packs in a smarter way. It's actually a triangle, so you can pack them alternate triangles. That's one change we've made. There's some example of the reduction in the size of the boxes, as I talked about before. On average, about 18% we've reduced the box. Same product, same play experience, same delivery to the consumer, just slightly less air being shipped around the world. But as I said, it sounds very simple, but it's a really, really complex project, both from a technical point of view, because when you're packing a product, you like to have lots of space so you can put it in the box and close the box without things sticking out the sides. But also from an engagement point of view, from retailers and customers and consumers, etc. Another example, which is a couple of years old now, but one where we've had a project called Design for Disassembly. So how do we improve our products for recyclability at the end of their life? And again, we're in a trade-off here because single materials are the most recyclable, things that are made of just one material. But often, when you talk to the designers, they want multiple materials co-molded together because that's the most exciting for kids. And I think most people who are in the product sector will tell you the same thing, is you have a trade-off between what the consumer wants or what the consumer believes they want and what you as a sustainability professional wants. And these are some of the, we feel really proud of this as an example. We're not saying this on its own is going to change the world. But what we did is we score all our elements, so all of our bricks from red through to green. Green is they're made of just one material. Yellow is that they're made of two or more materials. And red is that they're made of multiple complex materials, often meaning they have electronics or something in them. And so this was an element that we scored yellow because it has both metal on the left-hand side and plastic. And here it is. It's a Duplo wheelbase. So it's something that is preschool, that we give to preschool kids, and they can build on top of this. You can build a car or whatever. And as you can see, it has a metal axle, and you click it into a base. So what we did is we said, well, how can we manufacture that in a smarter way that makes it more recyclable? And as you can see in the picture, so we took the metal out, and we made these plastic plugs. So you plug the wheel on, there. And that means you can't take the wheel off. So number one, it's safer than this. So this has 3 parts. This only has 1 part. So what we did, we made it more safe. We reduced the manufacture time by half. We cut the cost by half of this, so it costs half as much to make this version as it does this version. And we improved the sustainability by 20%. And those are the things that we're really trying to find in our business, where you put a green lens over something and it turns out to be a far better business case, better for the environment and better for business, better for safety. They're hard to find. They're not everywhere in our business, but when we do find them, that we really want to latch onto them and use them as demonstrators for the kind of work we're trying to do. So this is all made of the same material or very similar types of material. You can put this all in the plastic recycling if and when you get to that stage. And I think that's one of our challenges at the moment, is that we're trying to promote this idea of reusability rather than recycling and disposal. So that's just an example there. On the wider challenge of sustainable materials, so far, so I mentioned that we really kicked this off again at the end of 2015. And so this year, we've been working on setting up the leadership, setting up the organization, creating the right processes. And I think some of the workshop that you've been into is some of the thoughts that we also have had. Where are we? Where do we need to get to? What are our biggest challenges? How much is it going to cost? And I think Daniela also talked about some of the mindset as well. And I think when we talk internally, we talk to our senior leadership and our owner, and they are so excited about this. When can we do it? We want to do it now. This is such a core thing for us as a company. Then we go to our engineering department, and they say, this is difficult. We don't know how to do it. This is causing me sleepless nights. And for us, it's trying to bridge that sort of real-world understanding of the challenges with the enthusiasm at the top of the company. And that's one thing our department is trying to do within change management within the company. So we've started to form some of the, carrying on with the progress, we've started to form some of the research partnerships that we need and started to look at some of our core products. The Sustainable Materials Center, so I mentioned earlier on that this is the sort of catalyst for what we want to do. We want to bring these 2 people together in a building and talk about it and engage, particularly children. That's where a lot of my enthusiasm lies, is engaging kids in this journey. What can we learn from them on sustainable materials, and what can we teach them, perhaps? And I'm probably more excited about what we can learn from them, to be honest. How do we look at materials? How do we make the trade-offs between a sustainable material and a high-performing unsustainable material, or vice versa, or whatever? We really want to engage with kids on this journey. The building itself we're just designing at the moment, so this is just a very, very early stage sketch, so please don't think we're going to build exactly this. But it has 3 basic components to it. It has a public space where we want to bring kids, teachers, universities, legislators, stakeholders, governments, whoever. We want to come and visit and show some of the work we're trying to do. Then it has what we call this collaboration space, where we want to bring, again, university research departments, our current suppliers of materials, new suppliers of materials, competitors we want to bring in here, we want to work with, which was a key choice that we made along this journey. And so we want to do some collaboration with them. And then in the yellow area is where we say, well, that's where it starts to get more specific around molding a Lego brick itself. So what we say is in that blue area, we want to work out how we have common interests around the same materials. So that could be in the pre-competitive space with our competitors, actually, and with others. So it could be Nike, could be BMW, could be Mattel, could be a university. We really want to work in that space and in that mind space of developing materials that fit all of our needs. And then we want to take that material into the sort of yellow area and work out how we mold that material into a Lego brick. And that's the bit that we think is the special bit for us. Other companies can take that material and do whatever they need to do with it, but we think molding it is into the brick shape is probably where we have our most sort of core secret area. Then we have a lab space where, of course, we want to do research and development and test things out. And we also want to have an access into that lab so we can show our visitors what we're up to and be inspired by them as well. So going forward, our challenges, there we go. We want to establish a materials advisory board, so using lots of people from a wide range of industries and academia to try and support us on this journey, and we would like to support them and be part of their journey as well. You know, we really think this is a collaborative journey. I think the one thing we've learned in the last couple of years is that there is no way we're going to do this on our own. We buy 76,000 tons of plastic, as I mentioned, a year, but that's actually a tiny fraction of the world's plastic production. But what we do recognize that we have is a very visible and global brand, and so we're aware of the sort of paradox between those two things. We need to launch a more detailed consumer insights program. We need to really understand what consumers want on this journey. And if they don't know, which in general they don't know what they don't know, or they don't know what they want, how do we work out together what might be appropriate on this journey going forward? And what about those trade-offs that I talked about? There are some trade-offs on this journey, and are we prepared to accept them? And are consumers prepared to accept them as well? We want to take, as we're designing the building, we want to kind of take it on the road. That's one of our current plans. So we want to do like a road show. So visiting could be schools, but it could be universities. It could be the EU, for example, in Brussels. But we want to take that road show somehow out there whilst we're building and designing the building. And one thing I say a lot internally is, the building is just a collection of people. Just because we have built this sustainable materials center does not mean we're any closer to where we're trying to get to. It's just a nice way of housing us together. The real drive and the real collaboration and inspiration comes from this group of people meeting together. They could do that in a shed, a garden shed. They could do it outside, or they could do it in a building. But we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking once we have a building we've completed the challenge. So 2018, we're going to break ground on the building. 2019, we hope to open it. We hope to host some sustainable materials conferences, create some quick wins in packaging. We've already done some. We would like to do some more. And then by 2020, we really want to start seeing some of those bricks coming into our portfolio. And one of the questions I'm also asked a lot is, when will we notice these bricks in your boxes? When can I hold one up and say this is a sustainable brick? And I guess my sort of rather trite answer is, I hope you never notice. I hope you don't even notice the transition. And that would be the ultimate goal in knowing when we've succeeded on this challenge. So what next? I think that's some of it on our materials journey. I think working a lot more with our consumers and understanding their needs is what I mentioned. And then I think the final piece is really on this circularity, is understanding how do we take the product once it's been used once, or maybe used multiple times, and think about how do we reflow it back into the system. One of our biggest challenges, I think, to share with you there is where we've piloted take-back systems in the past and take-back approaches, because I think that's the most obvious question, is why don't you just take it back and remold it? When we've piloted it, the amount of financial incentivation that people need to bring it back is almost, not quite, but almost on a par with the original purchase cost. So it doesn't create a model that we can work with at the moment, so we need to find a different way. And I think most people at this point tend to keep Lego in their attic, in their garage. There is a second-hand market of Lego on eBay, and there is a commodity price per kilo of Lego, and it fluctuates. We've got some good graphs of how that commodity price fluctuates. But that's probably the next biggest nut to crack, is one, how do we engage with children on a really meaningful way that takes them on a journey, an environmental sustainability journey throughout their lives, and what might our role be in that? So that's one challenge. And the other challenge is, how do we start to really think about this circularity? We haven't seen any products come to the end of their life yet. Even the ones made in 1958 are still totally playable. But at some point, the products are going to come to the end of their life. At some point, natural physics dictates that you won't be able to put them together. So we'll have to have a solution at that point. So that's it. I think that's 35 minutes, something like that. And I guess really opening up for questions. Hopefully what I've done is try and take you on a bit of a journey from where we started from in some ways, and some of the activities that we're up to. And I've tried to focus a bit more on sustainable materials as it's relevant to this audience. So please, any questions you have now or later, I think we've got 5 minutes. Is that right, Tim?
Thanks very much, Tim. Extremely exciting presentation. I have about 100 questions, but we've got time for 3. So, Sergio, the first question for you.
Oh, thank you both, Tim. Thank you, Tim, for your very great presentation. As we are both from industry and manufacturing, could be that we have some peculiar and similar problems. You said that only 10% of the environmental impact is within your hands, and 75% depends upon your supply chain. The question is, are you trying to influence your supply chain to be more respectful and to reduce the environmental impact? And if yes, how?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think hopefully I was trying to show that in some of our work on our Engage to Reduce program. You know, what we see is the same with code of conduct. If you write a code of conduct or if you write a code of environmental conduct and ask a supplier to sign it, of course they'll do it. But that may not drive the change you're looking for. So we're really thinking about how do we have a different dialogue with our suppliers, and that's what the Engage to Reduce piece is all about. How do we engage with you in something more meaningful? Really looking for that synergistic way of finding those opportunities where it's a win-win-win, where we get, by coming together, we get a benefit that's even greater than the sum of its parts, if you like. It's easy to say, and it's a very, very long and quite hard journey, but that's our approach. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we invited 20 of our top suppliers to Billund, and we literally locked them in a room for 2 days, and I'm not sure they knew that was going to happen, but we spent 2 days with them, and just look, open it up. You know, what if you could do anything you wanted with the Lego group and vice versa, what would it be? And we started off in groups of like-minded suppliers. We put all our transport suppliers in one group, all our plastic suppliers in another group. And then we mixed them up as well to say, look, if you transported this in a different way, and if you thought about resin in a different way or plastic in a different way, could we do something different? Lots of great ideas, some more practical than others. You know, could you deliver molten plastic from the plastic manufacturing plant straight into the molding plant? Of course you could, but you know, so that's one of the ways we're trying to do it through workshops. But I think we're always open to ideas. That is definitely going to be the big nut to crack.
Thank you.
Question, then Raphael.
Hey, nice presentation. In the beginning of the show, you said something about your short-term goal was to become neutral sustainably, and then the long-term goal was to be like sustainably beneficial. But you talked a lot about like optimization, efficiency optimization, and choosing like more sustainable alternatives for materials. Like, how do you propose going the next mile, like going actually beneficial for the environment?
Yeah, great question, and I think I would say that's my own personal ambition. I don't think it's one I've totally landed with our company yet, but I think it's a nice place to think about. One, I think an easy one is on energy. So at the moment, we generate more renewable energy than we consume. So in some way, we're, however you want to call it, carbon positive. You know, we take more carbon out of the world than we contribute to. I say that's easy. I mean, it's an easy one to understand. I think other ways might be to use, recycled or waste that exists out there in the environment for new products. So can you take things out of the system and create new products? So things that are already out there. There are other examples as well, but that's the hard one. I think it's easy, as you say, to make least negative or less negative by driving efficiency. And one day, you know, you could imagine a scenario of zero. I think the positive bit is where it gets really tough. But I think those are two potential examples.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Raphael from Staircase. I read a few weeks ago in the newspapers about a little company called NetBricks, which inspired like Netflix, provides the Legos as a service. I wondered if it's something that you are monitoring and encouraging. You're already doing a lot, I guess, with the spare parts in the sense that customers can come and get the little pieces that are missing or that are broken. If you could just tell us a little more about this service idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that those services exist. You know, that there's, I think you mentioned NetBricks. There's one called Play, and there are PLEY. I think, not that that's an advert, but I think there's lots of services out there, and we look at them, and it's not something that we feel we can do at this point in time in our journey. I think what we would rather focus on and what we really want to promote is the fact that people can pass down our bricks. And, on our website, we're trying, and we need to make it clearer. We get asked a lot of questions. What should I do with my Lego bricks when I'm finished with them? And on our website, we say, pass them on to people. Give them to friends, give them to family, give them to the school down the road, send them to your charity shop, whatever you need to do with them. And I think that's where we feel we can sort of promote that play and learning. It's not a business opportunity. We're just trying to get people to pass them on. I think there are some big complexities with the services you talk about, where they're essentially they're not selling a bucket of random bricks. They're selling a model that you can build. Well, that model could have up to 3,500 individual small pieces. So the complexity of that model is or business model, not model, but how do you make sure that you're getting the same 3,500 pieces into a child's home, out of a child's home, into the next user? And that's pretty complex, because you can't do it by weight. You need to have a fairly complex counting machine to do it. And I think that's where we really think about what is the play experience you're getting. If you want to build the Millennium Falcon and you're missing 15 pieces, and some of them are critical to building your Millennium Falcon, is that a good play experience or not? So that's a bit of a challenge. Yeah.
We got very technical there for a second, Millennium Falcons and things.
Well,
many thanks,
I don't know anything
Tim.
about that.
That's all we have time for just now. I have a really interesting question, I think, is what is the business case for the 1 billion kroner centre? Maybe we can take that in the panel discussion, but many thanks so far.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.